Welcome, dear listeners, to the Speak and Flow podcast, where we dive into strategies and unique stories to help you and your team achieve maximum potential and flow. Today, I have an amazing leader. She's a VP of marketing with over 20 years of experience in software as a service and ad tech. She has orchestrated marketing announcements for big companies such as Google, TikTok, Pinterest, and contributed to the sales and marketing organization within Pantheon, which achieved unicorn status and 1 billion valuation. Her name is Sarah Fruy. Hi, Sarah.
Thanks for having me.
I'm so glad you're here. We're going to dive into so many wonderful techniques and strategies around communication and teams. Before we go there, I know you were with Pantheon, and I just mentioned how it achieved unicorn status and 1 billion valuation, but you were there early on. Can you tell us, actually, before we jump into that story, tell us more about why you're passionate about marketing and sales.
So I actually started my career in sales and had an amazing CMO at the company I worked for. It was called Video Egg at the time, became Say Media. And I was working on a lot of individual ad campaigns and telling all these stories for all these different advertisers. And I was really inspired by his ability to really focus on our company's message and our go-to-market and how we sort of presented ourselves as a business. And it made me raise my hand and say, hey, I want to go work for the marketing team and tell these big stories and really focus on how to like up level the company that I work for and promote it to the best of my abilities. And that's really what's kind of driven me throughout my entire career. Maybe a really passionate marketer, but also a very like empathetic partner to the sales team of knowing what it's like on the other side and trying to, a great advocate for some of the struggles and pain points that they're dealing with as a marketer, where I'm there to sort of support them and help them achieve their goals as well.
Wonderful. And what do you think made it different, made him be able to communicate the company differently than others?
I think he was a true visionary. His name's Troy Young. I'll name drop a little here.
Okay.
He's one of those people. He was a great mentor for me early on in my career, like I said, and was just one of those people that when he stood up and spoke, you listened, and he was really inspiring. And if he critiqued my work, it was always like I was learning something from him in the process. It wasn't just like, oh, you messed up or you did something wrong or this could have been done better. He would take the time to sort of coach and bring me up and up level me at the same time, and it was just great leadership, experience and exposure, and just really inspired me to want to, follow in his footsteps and trying to have a similar impact as a leader myself.
Oh, that's so great. Cheers to the amazing leaders out there who are visionaries and also people oriented and helping to mentor others. So that's wonderful. So going back to that original question about Pantheon, tell us about what it was like before it got to its status, this great status.
Yeah, so when I joined, it was very much, like your Bay Area tech startup. We had a great product and a lot of great people, but like a lot of companies, teams were kind of silo. We were really focused on our individual functions and kind of like, passing things along. And when stuff was ready, you would sort of run forward and kind of march towards a bigger calendar. But it was really sort of all hands on deck, trying to do our best to move the business forward, but a little bit siloed in terms of our abilities to communicate and really like coordinate, across different teams.
I love that. I love that analogy and what you said, just pass it forward. It does feel like that because we're so, you're invested in the company, you believe in it, yet you're still focused in what we do or what you do within the department. And you feel like, okay, passing it over is communicating. Okay,
You go do your thing.
yeah, here you go. I did it. There, pass. Here you go, pass. And then it's like pass a baton, but then that's really not communication, but people may think that it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you're sort of in that box of like, well, I delivered the product or the messaging or whatever. Now your team has to go promote it or you have to go sell it. And each people like has like their little place in line in sort of this linear fashion.
Yes.
You can start to think more like cyclically of like, how do we like reflect back on that work? How do we like align our timelines? How do we, collaborate better? That's where you start to work more as an organization versus like an individual team.
Right. So before we get into that, like, tell me what were you think the negative impacts of it? You mentioned silos. Anything else?
I think one of the symptoms was like misalignment in terms of timing.
Okay.
You know,
Okay.
there was an incident early on in my career where the product team was working on a new feature and
Right.
they were ready to release it, and the release happened to be right around Thanksgiving. And as a marketer, that's not exactly, for some businesses, that can be a great time to launch a new product, especially if you're in,
Uh,
you know, in technology, not so much. Those people tend to go on vacation, they're meeting with their family,
right.
things like that. And so we would have preferred to have made this announcement in January, like kick off the new year. We've got this great new feature, where the product team was like,
Mhm.
oh, it's done. We have to announce it, has to be ready. And we were just very like misaligned in terms of our go-to-market and how we wanted to sort of approach that announcement. And I think the
Mhm.
result was that everybody felt it could have gone better had we been
Better.
more coordinated and communicated better about like the timing and the release and things like that.
So one team thought it was a good idea where another team didn't think it was a great idea, and it was just a misalignment of
Yeah, it kind of goes back to that
expectations.
baton thing. The product was like, well, we told you we are going to deliver this feature this year. And we did. Here it is. Now go. And the marketing said,
Right.
we're not in a place right now where it's a great time to make a big announcement. And so it was no one's fault. Like no one did anything necessarily like
Mhm.
wrong in the sense of like their jobs, but it was one of those things where, hey, if we had all talked about this a little bit more up front and aligned better on like the timelines and things like that, I think that the whole,
Mhm.
campaign could have gone a little bit better.
Yeah. What was the morale at that time?
I mean,
Was
it's
it?
one of those like work hard, play hard environments
Mhm.
where everybody is there because they want to be there. They're super
Mhm.
passionate, and I think that's where you get a lot of these. You know, the passion is strong, so that's where it's hard to like point fingers of like, well, nobody really like did something wrong, but
Mm.
it didn't go as well as it should have,
Mhm.
and and so I think it's just that. It's just like a lot of people kind of like very siloed, very passionate about what their work and wanting to do better. And then us kind of like taking a moment and being like, hey, like we all could have done better here. It wasn't like one function's failure or something like that.
Mhm. Mhm. That's
And like
good.
I think our shared desire to really move the company forward was what it made us kind of like reflect and think about like how can we change this behavior in the future to avoid this kind of situation.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm glad that you didn't run into the pointing the fingers and blaming, and that could have happened. And it sounded like they took some time to think about what could we do, how can we change this, and so what was implemented to change it.
So, one of the things that we did as a company was one of my counterparts in on the product team. He was training his team on agile methodologies, and they were going through Scrum
Mhm.
Master training. And he was a big proponent of let's make this a company-wide effort. Like, I don't want
Mhm.
just my team to be thinking this way. I would really think that it has a better impact if the whole company can. And so he came to me, he came to other leaders within the organization, was like, I would love it if you would join me in training and learning how to do work through this agile methodology and kind of explain to me how it works. And I was like, this is really interesting. I'd love to be a part of it. And so myself, folks from the marketing team, we had people from finance, we had people from sales, we had people from HR, we had people from product, we had people from engineering. The whole company had representatives. It wasn't the entire organization that went, but we all had people from our departments that
Uh-huh.
showed up for a couple of days of in-person training and got certified on Agile as Scrum Masters. And what we walked away with, which I think was really valuable, was a common alignment on how we can manage projects better through
Mhm.
Agile, but also like a vocabulary that we were all using that was the same. So when we talked about project management, we were using this language, we were all using the same language. And
Mhm.
and then we brought those ideas and that way of thinking back to our teams, and it
Mhm.
became a cultural change for the whole
Mhm.
organization. It wasn't just Sean's team was better or my team was better,
Mhm.
or my department was better. It was like
Mhm.
the whole company kind of got up leveled in the process, and we were all focusing on like how can we bring more agile to the work that we're doing? How can we work in an iterative fashion, break
Mhm.
projects down into smaller tasks that are more manageable so people aren't getting
Mhm.
stressed of like, oh, there's this huge thing that we have to do. Well, now the
Mhm.
huge thing is actually four smaller things, and those four smaller things are two smaller things. And then it becomes like,
Mhm.
what did I have to do today? What did I have to do this week versus
Mhm.
I have this big project that's due at the end of the quarter. And that
Mhm.
feels a lot less stressful. It feels a lot less more manageable. And then
Right.
another, communication tool that we got from that was this idea of retrospectives, where at the end of a milestone or a project, you meet with all the stakeholders and you talk about what went well, what could we have done better, and what do we want to do in the future. And that would bring folks from different departments together again as well. And
Mhm.
so we were talking together in a way that we hadn't before. There was a lot of like, oh, we
Right.
did the thing, now we moved on, we moved on, we moved on. But now it's like, no, wait, we're coming back together. We're talking as a group in a way that we don't normally in our jobs. It's normally like, team meetings or all hands or things like that. And pulling
Right.
these individuals in these smaller retrospective meetings was another great way that we sort of improve communication and learn from our experiences, and also got rid of like bad habits and bad behaviors that are ineffective, approaches that weren't working for the company, and everybody got stronger. And I think it was all of those things that sort of contributed to our success and hitting that unicorn status and really like catapulting the business forward.
Interesting. And what were some of the bad behaviors or because of the silos or the things that you felt like, because you would think that it would be more of a person from a bad behavior because something's happening within an employee, but it could be a whole overall environment issue that's creating this bad behavior. Like, what are some of the symptoms that you think that people can see or managers can start to spot if it's starting to become unproductive? Yeah.
So I think one of the things about Agile is not pointing fingers at individuals, but focusing on the
Hmm.
process. So
Right.
trying to take emotions out of it, of like so and
Uh-huh.
so didn't show up for the meeting, and because of that, we didn't hit this deadline. Don't blame that person. It was just like we missed, like the project missed deadlines, milestones weren't achieved when they were supposed to be. So how do we project manage better so that we aren't missing the deadlines that we agreed to? Like that would be like a way of
Oh, I see.
like
Got it.
that person, but blaming the process of like, did the team have too much on their plate? Were they overburdened?
Right.
Should we have had like less things going on at that time and focus more on like the work than the person? And then it feels less of
Mm.
like name pointing or finger pointing and name calling, and more like we're all trying to solve this. We're all trying to make it better. And like one of the things, like, rather than like maybe bad behavior was like a wrong phrase, but one of the things that we were able to improve was calendaring of like
Hmm.
product has these releases. That's great that they're
Uh-huh.
done. But how can we sync that up with marketing and how they have like bigger initiative? Maybe we have like a big event that we're preparing for, and that announcement, if we hold it for a couple more weeks or a couple more months, will be way more impactful to announce at this large event where we have all these people, we have a stage
Hmm.
presence. There's an opportunity for us to really make a much bigger impact versus just releasing it when it's ready. I mean, also like the tools that we were using, making sure that like our project management tool was like the same for everyone versus like earlier on,
Hmm.
everybody kind of had their own tool that like the manager or that department preferred, and being on the same platforms. All of a sudden, when you're sharing tasks and you're syncing these different things and you're providing feedback, you're logging into one system. You have one source of truth for everything. And that was another way that like as an organization, we sort of like made it easier for us to talk, easier for us to give feedback, easier for us to like move forward and have
Hmm.
transparency on the work that we were doing.
I love it. I love it. So it felt more like everybody was in it together. And I really enjoyed what you were saying. Like, it's about the process. It's about how can we do this together versus pointing the finger at one person.
Yeah.
And
Take the
that's
ego out of
great.
it, right? And focus on the work.
Yes.
If you're
Yeah.
having problems on an individual of like personality issues, like let's have those conversations privately with those individuals and sort of work
Mm-hmm.
through maybe some of those personality conflicts. But when it comes to like project management, like I think it's really kind of destructive when people start blaming others for things that like didn't go well, and
Mm-hmm.
focus more on the work of how could the work have gone better and the process that we like approach to doing that work.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that the agile process is like you break down the project into chunks, and then does every leader report back as a whole as a group? Going back to the idea of it's not being siloed, how did you manage all the different individual projects and get it all in alignment with everybody going in the same direction? How
Yeah,
does
I
that
think
work?
another element that we use at Pantheon, that I think contributed to our success was OKR, so objectives and key results. And that was another, institutional change that we rolled out over a couple of years. Like it took time for us to kind of like bring that process into the organization as well. But that is essentially that you have like a larger company goal, departmental goals, and
Mhm.
then individual goals, and they all kind of cascade down. And so one of the ways that helps bring alignment is like the best goals in terms of success are ones that are shared across departments. And so
Okay,
like marketing would share a
got
goal,
it.
or product, or all three of us have
Yeah,
a shared goal. And so then
yeah,
working on these projects is like, okay, does this help us achieve our OKR? Yes or no.
right,
If the answer is no, then maybe we shouldn't be doing that work. Maybe it's a great idea, and maybe it could make us a
right.
little money, or bring us some new customers or improve retention or whatever the goal is. But if it doesn't serve the goal that we've agreed to, we kind of have to table that. And so like at a high level, you have shared goals. And then as
Right.
the project goes on, I think it's like part of that calendaring is having
Mm-hmm.
like very clear timelines and
Mm-hmm.
deadlines for things of milestones that you need to hit. Like maybe the product needs to be
Mm-hmm.
ready by a certain point. We need to have a press release from the marketing team, and sales needs to have a training on how they're going to go to market with it. And finance needs to make sure there's a new billing thing. And so all of these different departments know that by like the end of this month or the end of this quarter, we have to do these things or else this project isn't going to be successful. And then the leaders of the project kind of come together on a regular basis to make sure that we're on target. If something's going on with product or marketing or whatever function that says like I can't actually hit that deadline, then we all have to agree like, are we going to delay this or are we going to move forward without that element of the project and consider it like, you know, if it's 90% there instead of 100% there, is that okay? And maybe that is, but making sure
Right.
that we're all clear in terms of like if certain aspects can't be delivered on time or we need to push out a deadline or something like that, that everyone's on the same page. So there's no surprises. That's a
Mm-hmm.
like, good communication, I think, reduces the element of surprise.
Right, right. I love that idea of bringing everybody together to work on a project. Because aren't those projects the best when everyone, all hands are on deck? I mean, yes, everybody will have their individual goals, but to have some key projects that are aligned with the big goal, I mean, you're bringing everybody together to work on something, and then there are no surprises. You're communicating together all toward one thing or a couple of big things. Then I think that can really elevate the organization so much more faster, more quickly, right? In terms of because our organizations nowadays, I mean, we're in so much competition. There's a lot of things going on, and so having everybody work on some key initiatives together versus every department on their own initiatives.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, Simon Sinek, like, you know, start with why. That's a great
Yeah,
um like a great like capsule for
concept.
sort of like creating that why
Right.
for people, right? When you have
Yeah.
every department head mapping up to the same goal, that's your why. That's how you sort of inspire people. That gives them motivation of
Mm-hmm.
understanding where they
Mm-hmm.
fit within that versus just being told, oh, finance has to create this new SKU. Well,
Mm-hmm.
that's my job. But now, oh, I understand why, because we have this huge announcement and this product's getting released and that product is
Yes.
for revenue goals and that revenue goal is going to get me, you know, my bonus and all these things. And then it makes people more inspired and empowered and wanting to deliver that result versus feeling like they have to deliver that result.
Mm-hmm. And what happens when there's a change? Like, what if the higher up, the executives, they all decide that they're going to, everybody's all excited, we're doing this thing, okay, we're all on board, and then suddenly there's a change, we have to change things. Have you ever been in that situation where the change has to happen and then people don't want to move anymore? They're
Yeah, I
resistant. Yeah.
think the way, and that's another area where I feel like Agile has been very helpful for me as a leader.
Okay.
Is one of the things with Agile is like committing to a certain volume of work, right? And sometimes
Mm-hmm.
when things change, it's something that's getting added to your plate. It's very rarely that the heads are like, oh, we're going to do this, and you're going to not have as much work to do. It's usually like
Exactly.
going to change something and it means more work for you. And so like as a manager, one of the ways that I can advocate is like, okay, well, we've committed to this volume of work for this quarter or this month or whatever. And by adding this to my plate, we have to take something off because
Mm-hmm.
either that or you need to give me more resources or you need to give me more
Mm-hmm.
budget. But that's a way that I can kind of like put it in perspective of like, if I do this, then either this isn't going to go as well or we can't deliver that. And these are the
Right.
trades. So yes, I can do that, but my quality of work is going to go down in these areas. Or if you want me to do the best thing I can, then you need to give me more resources and have just like a very real conversation to manage expectations about what this change, like the impact of that's going to have on my team. Um,
Right.
so that if we are overwhelmed and we're overworked and things like that, like I was very clear up front, like this is going to burn my team out and I don't want that. So like, let's bring on a contractor for a couple of weeks and like, it doesn't need to be a
Right.
new hire. Like, just because you're asking for more resources, it doesn't always have to be some huge thing where you're like hiring people for months. You can bring on a contractor or find maybe a new technology that's going to help like take things off of your team's plate and automate some
Mm-hmm.
sort of tasks and responsibilities. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's a way to sort of manage some of those things that can feel really overwhelming is sort of like,
Mm-hmm.
how do I chip away at this and make sure that I'm not going to burn my team out in the process while still giving the management team what they need to be successful.
Right, right. And having that clear, direct, honest conversation. and letting them know this is, and I love, like you said, because you have very clearly the capacity, the job, what you have to do, and like, okay, and letting them know to do a quality job, then you need more resources or take something off. And so having that clear conversation with them.
Mhm.
Yeah, love that. I've taken away so much from this conversation, Sarah. I like to end with the question that I ask all my guests. What is that one leadership golden takeaway that you'd like people to remember?
So I think, based on what we've been talking about today, the big takeaway for me is really that when you think about how you can have an impact as a leader, think bigger than just your team or the department that you're managing, but really think about how can I lead this organization to the next level? And a lot of that comes from working with your peers on other teams and other departments and getting them to sort of implement that change and bring that forward with you. And I think that when you can collaborate across departmental teams and really think bigger picture, that's how you really move the business forward versus really just focusing on your individual team and departmental goals. And that's what's going to help you forward in your career and really move the business forward at the same time.
I agree. Help really take the business, because you're now seeing the bigger picture. You're putting yourself in the leader's position and looking broadly about what can really help this organization thrive and be more cohesive, move together more effectively, and using your voice. Don't be afraid to use your voice to communicate when you have an idea to make things more cohesive and effective. Then speak up. Say it, and like you mentioned, right, use it across the organization, across the different departments, and not just within your own. And that's
Yeah.
going to really help you
Bring those
shine.
partnerships, like don't go it alone. If you go it alone,
Yeah,
it's gonna be harder when you gather a team around you and you gather support for your ideas. That's how like everybody wins together versus just trying to go it on your own.
right. And I think that with many of the leaders, they're just thinking about, well, I'm going to go about it together with my department, and it's
Mhm.
only within my department. But going back to what you had mentioned earlier, you don't just pass the baton about your job role or what you've just done to the other department. And because it's not really effective like that within organizations. To have a really solid organization, you're thinking, okay, more big picture, more cohesive. Let's work together.
Absolutely.
Yes, thank you, Sarah, so much. I had a lot of fun hearing about the story of Pantheon and your leadership and all of your marketing experience, sales and marketing experience. I really appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Okay, audience, thank you so much for joining. And until I see you next time, I'm your sister in flow. May prosperity flow to you and through you to others. Thank you. Bye. Thanks for joining the conversation today. Are you curious on how you measure up with your ability to speak in flow? Come grab my free self-assessment at https://speakinflow.com/assessment. And I'll see you on the other side.